Shall I call you Professor or Eddy?
If you want to call me Professor, please call me Herr Geheimrat Professor Doctor.
Okay.
Otherwise, you call me Eddy, like everybody else.
Eddy, we start at the beginning. We start in an unusual place. Your beginning was in Shanghai.
Yeah.
Why? You don't look Chinese.
Because I was born there, because my parents were it's a long story, as a matter of fact.
It's important.
My maternal grandfather, the Taperneau family, they were in Paris. And they were in Paris at the time where you had this big scandal called l'affaire Dreyfus.
The biggest scandal.
Yes. He was a journalist, and he worked at the newspaper L'Aurore,
the great
which
one.
Published the letter by Émile Zola.
J'accuse,
le colonel d'Henri, J'accuse.
A great moment in history.
Which landed him in prison, by the way. And when the affaire Dreyfus exploded in 1901,
yes,
he went to the French colony, which was called Le Tonkin.
Yes.
Hanoi. And my mom, who was, I think, 8, 9 years old, went
of course, with
him.
With her family.
So she was born in Paris, or close to Paris, and she was French.
She was French, not Swiss.
No, she was French.
French,
because her father was Swiss. But as a young man, he left the region of Vevey, which is on the other side of Lake Geneva, with his violin. He played the violin, and he became a journalist in Paris on the affaire, on L'Aurore. And then so he went to the Tonkin, and I believe he founded a French newspaper, or worked on a French newspaper in Hanoi. And then in 1906, the Manchu dynasty collapsed.
So
China opens its borders to foreigners, so he went to Shanghai. And he founded the l'École municipale française. There was already some divisions. There was concessions.
Yes, the foreign concessions.
The British concession, the international concession.
I'm going to interrupt only because to get you born, I have to raise your mother in Shanghai.
So I was
but I also have to get your father there for you to come. So why is your father there?
Yeah, my father was born in Gmunden, which is a place close to Vienna on the lake. And he studied both law and I think economics or something like that. So they always called him Dr. Oscar Fischer. And he went to China before the war as part of an import-export firm from Austria. And then he married my mother before World War I. So they spent World War I in Shanghai.
In Shanghai. Now, you were not the first of their children.
No, I was.
How many before you?
I was the third.
Third.
My oldest brother, Raoul, was born, he was 7 years older than I was. Then he was born just, I think, at the beginning of the war. And my brother, Georges, second brother, was born 3 years or 5 years before I was born. So it was also the war. They were born during the war.
The war. Now, what I want in a short time we have to get some sense of the culture of your family. Is it in Shanghai speaking French among yourselves?
Yes,
you were living a kind of French.
Always spoke French.
Always spoke French.
And then, in Shanghai, with the population, they spoke pidgin English.
Yes.
So I spoke English.
So your first English was Pidgin English?
Well, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Of course, of course.
It was, yeah, I knew some English words. I spoke English. And in fact, I spoke English quite fluently because when I came to Switzerland, when my father decided that, Shanghai is not a place for the kids to get an education.
Yeah, the best education, yes.
So he insisted, my mother was not happy, he insisted that the 3 kids be put in a big boarding school close to Geneva called La Châtaigneraie.
Now, you were all Swiss citizens at this point? No,
not at all. As a matter of fact, I was born an Italian citizen.
Really?
Yes, because my father was Austrian.
Yes.
And after the war, a part of Austria became Italian. And the Austrians has the opportunity, if they wanted, to select the Italian
citizenship,
nationality. And since my father he was an attorney at law, he had a big international law office, and one of his co-worker was Italian, I remember, by the name of Musso. He decided to opt for the
Italian.
And since my mom was French,
yes,
he opted for the Italian nationality. So I was born, in fact,
an Italian in Shanghai.
In Shanghai.
Now, you begin a very international life.
I only spoke French at home. I learned Italian fluently because when my father put the 3 kids in Switzerland, my mom always stayed in Shanghai. My father stayed in but my mom came every year to Switzerland to take the kids for a summer vacation. She usually came by the Trans-Siberian. She preferred that because otherwise the boat was very, very warm. There were boats which went from Shanghai to Venice, Conte Verde, Conte Rosso, I don't know. But she came by the Trans-Siberian and then always took us to Venice, to the Lido di Venezia.
So here, again, just because of the time, I get a sense of the multicultural origins that you have, which will continue your whole life. But I want to begin to search for the scientific origins. For example, so your parents are not scientists.
Not at all.
At home, before even you leave for school in Switzerland, you're not hearing science talked about, nothing like this.
That's right.
Okay, so I have to get you, to Europe. We have gotten you to Europe. At a very young...
27.
Yeah.
Stayed 6 years at the Châtaigneraie.
And what are your interests then? What are your influences? Because now it's the school influences.
That is easy to tell you, as a matter of fact. I had read some books about microbe hunters, the Paul de Kruif book on microbe hunters, book about Robert Koch, who discovered the Koch bacillus, and particularly Louis Pasteur. At age 13, I remember, 13, 14, I had a very great admiration for Louis Pasteur because he and his group are those who had discovered leprosy and who had discovered, who had made antibodies against, started tuberculosis. They had a vaccine against rabies, which at that time was absolutely devastating.
Devastating, yes.
Disease. So
So he becomes your
hero.
hero.
He had done the most fundamental work against tuberculosis.
Okay.
And since my father had tuberculosis, and he died from it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, he had tuberculosis. You know, he was a chain smoker.
Oh, yes.
He smoked all day. His 2 fingers were always brown.
Yes.
Since he had tuberculosis, as a young kid, I dreamt of becoming a microbiologist and finding a cure for tuberculosis. This is what led me towards science.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wonderful to know, and also that it's not so much your father as an instructor in science, but as an example.
Yeah, because I didn't see him. I never saw. He was in Shanghai.
Yes.
He came. He could come to Europe for maybe a few weeks every other year or something. My mom came every year.
Every year.
And as I told you, took us to the Lido di Venezia for the summer vacation.
Not bad.
Yeah, so Venice for me is
a dream city.
My dream city.
Tell me about influences in your school. You were beginning on your own, this passion about medicine and so forth. Do you have, let us keep you at 13 or 14, do you have a mentor, a teacher that moves you?
Louis Pasteur.
Louis Pasteur was your teacher, so to speak. Yeah. And no one good in science in the school, nobody encouraging you?
It's really a very long story. I had a very good friend at the Collège Calvin of Geneva. His name was Wilfred Haudenschild. And he and I decided I wanted to become a microbiologist. So we rented an attic in a house for 16 Swiss francs a month. You could, $4, you could do that in those days. And we converted this attic into a laboratory, which we call Le Labo.
Oh.
And we decided to, for my 16th birthday, my parents, who lived in China, asked me what I wanted. And I said, I want a microscope. So they wrote to, here the planes, the fighter planes outside, by the way. They wrote to my brother, who was at the Poly in Zurich, to buy a microscope for me.
Yes.
I expected to receive, the kid microscope that you buy.
A toy, a kind of
toy. He went to the shop of the Polytechnic and bought a lights microscope, professional, with 3 objective, moving part, absolutely professional microscope. 4 oculaire. It was a treasure.
And you appreciated that he had given you this.
Oh, yes, I expected to have the kid thing.
Yes.
And I was getting an absolutely professional lights microscope.
And you were competent to deal with such?
With the immersion lens for which, you could see bacteria. So, armed with this microscope, renting this laboratoire in the attic of a house, we decided we could solve all the problems of the world, you see. And of course, I wanted to work on tuberculosis.
Yes.
Because my dad had tuberculosis. Of course, I could work on Mycobacterium tuberculosis. But reading, and I had picked up a big book of microbiology that they used And so I read the whole book, and I found out, and then I had bought in Paris, Sur les quais, you know, where you buy a huge book on la tuberculose by, it'll come back.
Yeah.
So we had in this book, in the end of this book, Sur la tuberculose, by Calmette and Guérin. It said that some people had claimed that tuberculosis, the mycobacterium, had a principe filtrant, a principle that could go through big filters called bougies Chamberlain that stopped all bacteria. In other words, that the tuberculosis bacillus has a kind of virus.
Yes.
You see, that was not stopping those bougies.
Yes.
So we knew nothing, in fact, but we knew enough about viruses to know that you couldn't grow viruses by themselves.
Yes.
They had to have another cell in which to grow.
Yes.
And that's it's a long story.
But
anyway, a guy, a Russian fellow, and I can't even remember his name now, he had given a talk at the University of Geneva. I remember the two kids who went there.
At 16, 17.
15, I would
15.
say. At 15, he had given a talk that he had discovered something that he called mitogenetic rays. And he had the root of a plant, and he had a root of another plant, and he showed that cells divided much faster on one of the roots. Of course, it was absolute bunk. It was absolutely idiotic. I don't know who a Nobel laureate called it paranoid science. But we who didn't know better, we said,
it was a revelation.
There are mitogenetic rays. Maybe this is what you need to grow viruses. So I was, compared to the other kids, I was considered a rich boy because my parents were in China. My mother came every summer, took us to the Lindau. I bought a professional autoclave, and then we went, and then we said, of course, we cannot work on tuberculosis bacillus, but there are bacilli called para-tuberculosis that are not infectious. So we said we have to get some para-tuberculosis bacillus, but we can only get them, they had none in Geneva, from the Institut Pasteur. So we said we have to write to the Institut Pasteur, but they will never send anything to kids.
Of course not.
So we printed some letter papers at the top, laboratoire de chimie, de biologie et de chimie. Laboratoire de LBC, de biochimie. And we wrote a letter to the Institut Pasteur saying we are interested in working on the
in your laboratory,
bacillus.
You are Swiss researchers.
Could you send up? So, and we thought there's not a chance that they send us anything. Within 10 days, we received 2 tubes of paratuberculosis, Bacille de la Fléole, Bacillus flei, and then we were there. And we said, Jesus, now what do we
do with
red,
it?
you know, to make agar plates and things like that. But we said, you know, we're a little bit lost. So we confided in our professor of botany at school, whom we admire very much. His name was Minot. He was the professor of, I think it wasn't biology. It was, anyway. He said, we said, look, we have received some bacilli from the Institut Pasteur. We would like to know how we should proceed. He hit the ceiling.
I hope so.
He says, you can't do that.
Yes.
You absolutely have to go to the university and speak with the chairman of bacteriology. So there we walked over there. No, we didn't take the
You didn't take the treasure.
Over there. And the professor of microbiology was Professor Schoda. And we asked if we could speak with him, and he said yes. So we came to Schoda, and we explained to him that we had made a laboratory, that we had written to the Institut Pasteur, and that they had sent us those bacillus. And Schoda couldn't believe it.
Of course,
he looked at those two kids from the collège, speechless.
Yes.
And we expected at any time that he would say, get the hell out of this office.
Yes, yes.
And after a while, he said, look, I'll tell you what. It's June. Your college finishes in 2 weeks. I will give you a place in my laboratories, and I will make you go through the practicum that we give to medical students.
Oh, so he recognized these were serious young people.
Absolutely.
Yes.
For us, it was paradise. For the first time, we walked in a professional laboratory, research laboratory. There was an assistant called Martin, a tall fellow. He thought that those two kids were crazy to spend a summer.
Yes.
You know, a whole summer. He made us grow yeast, he made us grow bacteria, and for us it was paradise to such an extent that we couldn't even see let's say, the black clouds
in Europe
at the horizons.
Right, right. You are immersed in your science. We have to get you into the next stage, but we have a dilemma because you're also good in music.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do we decide about your future now?
We were, at that time, we were 17 and 18.
Yes.
And we worked there on bacteria, and for us it was wonderful.
Yes.
And then it was the end of the summer, and came time, by that time, to go to the university.
Yes.
And we decided we wanted to work together when we were adults.
Yes.
And we decided one of us should do medicine and the other one should do bacteriology.
This is how you were going to save the world. Yeah. Yes.
Actually, we drew
lots, yeah.
And I drew science, chemistry, and he drew medicine. He said that I cheated. I probably did, because I didn't want to do medicine. I wanted to really do
research.
To do research.
Yes.
And And so I went to the professor of microbiology and I said, you know, I would like to be a researcher in microbiology.
Yes.
And I always remember, never forget what he told me. He said, you know, if you want to do research in bacteriology, you have to study chemistry first. Because nowadays we use test tubes much more than we use microscopes. And I always remember that.
Yes.
So I joined a school of chemistry. I joined a school of chemistry, and I'll never forget the day I enrolled. It was September 1st, 1939. Because at 4 o'clock in the morning, the radio had announced that World War II had exploded. The invasion of Poland by Nazi Germany.
Yes.
And Soviet Russia. So we were a bunch of students, very disquieted, very calm, because World War II had just exploded.
Yeah, disaster.
Just started.
Disaster for Europe. But you are a little safe physically because you are in Switzerland.
Yes, I was in Geneva.
You were in Geneva.
So I had never been involved in a war. Never. You know, when there was the Vietnam War here, the students of the Department of Biochemistry, they were very sort of against that. And one day they said they wanted to speak with the faculty about that. So we met in a conference room, and the students said, we want the faculty to come out with a declaration that they would never fight or be involved in a war. And I got up and I said, I will never sign this, because I was in Switzerland during World War II, and we felt guilty of not being involved in a war that we felt had to be fought.
A just war, yes.
A just war.
Yes.
And we felt guilty that those kids from France, etc., got killed in the war, and we were,
and you were
safe.
You were
in
safe.
Switzerland.
But you continued. I mean, you were safe at least. So
in Switzerland.
So you could pursue your work, and it was never interrupted.
Absolutely without interruption. You know, when the war started, I went to the French consulate. My mother was French, and I said, you know, I would like to go to France and
fight for France.
Fight for this war. And the consul was probably a very smart guy. He said, look, this is very nice, Légion étrangère, etc. Just stay in Switzerland, make your studies, because that will be much more important. So,
an important person in your life.
It would. Yes, I was ready. I went to enroll in the Légion étrangère, Africa, to fight a war that I felt had to be fought. Yes. So this is
to go from war and chemistry. I still want a little bit about the musician too. So you also are tempted, possibly, to study music as well at this time?
Yes. Now, the music story is a funny one.
Yes.
Well, not a funny one. My parents insisted, they were in Shanghai, that I have an abonnement for the Orchestre de la Suisse Romande.
Okay.
The conductor was Ernest Ansermet. So I went. to not only that, but every time there was a piano here during the war, all the Rubinstein, everybody came to Geneva to give recitals because it was a free country.
Free country, yes.
There was, in one of the concerts of the Orchestre de la Suisse Romande, I saw a fellow by the name of Johnny Aubert, considered, there were two best pianists in Switzerland, one Eddy Fischer, no relation, and Johnny Aubert.
Okay.
And he gave an absolutely superb rendition of Beethoven's Fifth Piano Concerto, the Emperor Concerto. And I thought that was wonderful. So, speaking about that, the next day at school, the guy said, but he's a professor at the conservatory. So that Saturday afternoon, I went to the conservatory, saw Monsieur Gagnebin, the director, and I said, I would like to study piano with Monsieur Aubert. First of all, he said, turn around. Turn around. He had an upright piano. He banged a note. I don't have the absolute, but I said, la bémol. It was right. It happened to be right. And then once I had, I could recognize whatever note. He said, okay, he's giving his Saturday afternoon class. Why don't you go up? It's upstairs. He has the largest class in the conservatory of Geneva, the first floor. And wait until the end. He's giving his Saturday afternoon master class. He was the top pianist. So there was a very large room. There were two grand pianos. Johnny Aubert was the one on the left. The student was just next to him on the right. He was against the wall. In the back there was a bench where students and auditors stopped. I sat there. And at the end of the lesson, I said, Monsieur Aubert, I would like to study piano with you. He said, well, okay, prepare a couple of things. Come see me when you're done. So I left, and for a whole week, I started polishing two of the things I was already playing. I had a little upright piano in my room. So I came back the following Saturday. I said, okay, I have a Polonaise by Chopin or the Rondo, he said Mendelssohn, a Rondo Capriccioso, which is a classic piece of Mendelssohn piano literature with his two piano concertos.
Yes.
Two concertos. So he said, Mendelssohn. So the Rondo Capriccioso by Mendelssohn starts with a very long introduction, andante, very romantic and nice. And then it turns into the rondo itself, presto. In the middle of the Rondo Capriccioso, I screw up.
No.
I stopped. Absolutely cold. And the piano, half of your memory is in the fingers, 2/3 of the memory in the finger. I was absolutely stopped. But before I could wonder, Johnny Aubert, who was next to me, picked it up exactly at this point on his piano. So it put me back on track, and we played the whole second half of the Rondo Capriccioso with two pianos.
And with the greatest pianist in Switzerland.
I think he enjoyed having a chance, after listening those months, to play the piano himself. He enjoyed it and pushing me faster and faster. And then we finished
And
together.
you kept up.
Yeah.
You kept up.
Yeah.
So will you go to the conservatory then?
Yes. So he took me, said, okay, I'll take you. And I worked with him for 6 years.
So at the parallel studies, you are studying at the conservatory.
I told them, at the conservatory, you had sort of two classes. You have the professional, those who
Yes.
finish with diploma, virtuosity, and in which you have to play the piano 5 hours a day.
Yes.
And then what they call classes libres. Classes libres are just people who have, I was at a collège,
Yes.
who could come and just take, let's say, piano lessons.
So these are the people for pleasure, the music of pleasure. The others are the music of professional.
Other are the professionals.
And you know you will be,
Yeah, for me it was,
no question.
there was no question that I wanted to go into science at that time.
Yes.
But, I had the piano for the garden.
So for you to go into science as we progress in your studies, you must complete first an undergraduate, what we would call undergraduate studies in
I
chemistry.
went to School of Chemistry.
Chemistry.
For 4 years.
Okay. What do we do to get you to your next stage? How are you now deciding after you've completed this degree? I assume with honor.
I got a diploma of chemistry.
Yes.
And then I worked. First a diploma, and then I worked for a PhD degree.
In Geneva.
In Geneva.
Yes.
Yes, in Geneva.
And the PhD was to be in chemistry?
In School of Chemistry.
Still in chemistry.
And but I was interested in the biology sides, whereas chemistry they didn't have any course of biochemistry.
Ah.
So I became a privat-docent at the university, and in fact, the Professor Chaudat, when I became privat-docent, he called me and he said, would you like to give a course with me?
No.
And I said, of course. He said, look, it will be on vitamins. I will discuss, you see the fighter planes?
Yeah.
I will discuss the production of vitamins in plants, etc. And you can discuss the chemistry of vitamin and the mechanism of action. So I gave, for a year, maybe more, and then I gave a course in enzymology to at the School of Chemistry. So the botany course was given at the university, and the chemistry course was given at the School of Chemistry.
How are you deciding on your dissertation? What topics to focus on?
For my dissertation, there were only 3 divisions in the school. There was organic chemistry, there was inorganic and analytical chemistry, and there was physical chemistry.
Okay.
So there were 3 professors, head of those 3 sections.
Yes.
And I immediately decided to go to organic chemistry, whose chairman was Kurt Meyer. Kurt Meyer had come from Germany. He was not at Heidelberg, he was in Frankfurt, the professor, at IG Farben or whatever company it was. So I went to Professor Meyer, and he had a couple of projects that was as postdoc. And one was on an enzyme, and I wanted to be becoming a biologist. I was interested in enzymes. So he he said, I have a problem. There's an enzyme, an important enzyme called alpha-amylase. It's an enzyme that is produced in saliva, in the pancreas, which cuts starch in pieces, the degradation of starch.
Yes.
And amylase has never been purified or crystallized. Yeah, people had worked for many years to try to purify it, and there was a German Nobel Laureate, in fact, what's his name? I forget, who had purified and finally arrived at a little material which he thought was a carbohydrate. And I remember his collaborator was Waldschmidt-Leitz, I don't remember his, and he came out with a theory that enzymes had to have the structure of their substrate. And since amylase was working on the degradation of starch, amylase had to be a carbohydrate. And Kurt Meyer said, that's
Nonsense.
complete bug, that's idiotic. Let's purify amylase and show that it's really a protein. So this is why I started on amylase. And I isolated the enzyme, crystallized the enzyme, which at that time was considered, now, you know, you crystallize things one after to the other, but in the annual review of biochemistry, they said, the guy who wrote that review said the big thing is that amylase has been crystallized.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
By Fischer and Kurt Meyer.
By this young man.
So that's...
So I'm guessing the dissertation was a success, and you are now facing a career, rejoicing in a career in...
Yeah. So I stayed in Geneva and then Kurt Meyer died of an asthma crisis. And I always wanted to go to America for two reasons.
Yes.
One, my brother George
was already there.
In Pasadena, he was in Los Angeles at CBS. And secondly, because biochemistry was almost non-existent in Europe. It was quite advanced in Great Britain. There was one or two groups at the Institut Pasteur, but that was it. But most of the advances were carried out in America. So I wanted to go to America to really, enter the field of biochemistry.
This is the late 40s, early 50s?
By that time, it was 1953.
Okay. So up to this point, you're European with ambitions to be a microbiologist in America.
Exactly.
How do you get to America?
So I came to America and went to Caltech.
But who invites you? You don't just say, I want to go, and you go.
I went by accident. First of all, I went to Zurich to the consulate of America.
Yes.
And I said, I want to go to America, not with the visitor's visa. My brother George said, don't come with the visitor's visa, they kick you out after 2 years.
Okay.
Come with a permanent visa. And the consulate, there was a lady, and she says, we are on the quota system, and you are on a pretty bad quota, which is foreigners born in Asia.
That was your quota.
Yeah, because I was born in Shanghai. And it'll take about, my guess is 3-4 years for you to get your visa. And I say, thank God. I don't want to go to America now. I was really involved in interesting studies in Geneva. I don't want to leave before 4 years. I'm very happy about that. It was a crazy interview. You know, she was interviewing me about me. Are you an alcoholic? And I wasn't sure. I was with my wife, you know, Nelly.
Yes.
I said, what do you mean? I'm not sure what. She said, well, do you drink alcohol? I said, of course I drink alcohol.
I'm a European.
We drink wine. That's just,
right.
No. And I got sort of pissed by her. She got pissed by me. And when we went to Zurich, I had my son Francois, that you met.
Yes.
That you know, he was he was 3 years old, 2.5 years old, and she was he says, what languages does he speak? He was a 3-year-old. I said, well, like every Swiss, he speaks French, he speaks English. His German is not very good. She got really pissed. Anyway, so I go back to Geneva.
Yes.
Very happy that I would have my visa 4 years. Within 4 months, she calls me. She asks,
4 months.
You have your visa. You have to leave. I said, I don't want to leave. She says, you have to leave within 4 months because I don't. If you don't, I don't know what's going to happen. In America, they have just passed an act called the McCarran Act.
Yes.
To weed out communists. If you don't leave within 4 months, I don't know what's going to happen. So I left.
So she wasn't such a bad person. I mean, in the end, she was an advocate.
Yeah. So
you went.
So I left. It was very difficult for me because the boss had died.
Yes.
They had, I don't know how many groups of research, so I had to take care of them, you know, write for them their papers. I wrote very easily, you know, manuscripts to send to the journals. So I sat with the groups and they wrote the thing and then I put it in French. We published most in the Helvetica Chimica Acta.
In your head, are you expecting to be moving permanently to the States?
Yeah.
You are?
Yeah.
This is goodbye to Europe?
I thought so. I wasn't certain. By the way, I arrived here.
Yes.
And then there was the McCarthy era.
The worst possible time.
Yes, and then I remember writing the guys in Europe, you know, I probably will come back within a year because
these people are crazy.
America is going the way Germany and Mussolini, Italy went. And then there was the
hearings.
McCarthy against the army.
Yes, the famous hearings.
And he was wiped out.
Yes. So you decide to stay.
Yeah.
But still you need a job. Who knows about you? You have a reputation already?
So I was at Caltech, and I moved to Hans Neurath, who was chairman of the Department of Biochemistry in Seattle. Sent me a letter.
Yes.
Dear Dr. Fischer, I have heard from Professor Max Delbruck that you were spending some time at Caltech, and I would like to speak to you of something that might be of mutual interest. So I asked the guy across the bench, what the hell does he mean by that?
Yes.
He said, he means he wants to offer you a job.
Wow. Why would an ambitious young man leave Caltech?
Well, when I arrived in America, I had a friend in Pittsburgh. I gave a talk there. They offered me a job. Then she said, you have to call Henry Lardy in Madison. I called, he said, why don't you come and give us a talk? I went to Madison, they offered me a job. I go to Caltech, they offer me a job. I said, I must be brilliant.
Yes, yes, clearly.
Hell no, they were building medical schools right and left in this country.
They needed professors.
And they were scrounging to find people.
It must have been that, yes, no other reason.
Yes, so I called Henry in Madison. I said, you know, you guys are offering me a job. This fellow Neurath is offering me a job in Seattle. They have a brand new medical school. He says, go to Seattle. You'll love it. There's a lake, there are mountains.
It's Switzerland. It's America's Switzerland.
America's Switzerland. And I did, and I never regretted it.
So the project was what? Because this leads, after all, in the end, to your getting a Nobel Prize. So I'm a little curious.
Yeah.
What do you begin to work in?
So I continued working on amylase.
Yes.
And when Neurath came to Los Angeles, he had a young fellow next to him by the name of Ed Krebs, and I knew him from the literature. It was not Sir Hans Krebs from Oxford, who became a good friend.
Yes.
It was Ed, and I knew he was working. I had read in the literature on an enzyme called glycogen phosphorylase. So when I moved to Seattle, I had my project on amylase. In fact, I succeeded in bringing a student of mine from Geneva who had just finished his PhD degree as a postdoc, Eric Stein, a very close friend. He came, but with Ed Krebs, he had done some work with Carl and Gertie Corey. They were most famous biochemists in America. They were Nobel Laureates, both of them. And with the Coreys, Ed Krebs had worked on this enzyme, glycogen phosphorylase. And when he moved to Seattle, he started working on something else, because in those days, when you left a group, a department working on a project, you did not work on that project.
Yes.
You know, you did not touch, you did not carry away the project on which you worked as a postdoctoral fellow.
This is the ethics of the profession.
That was the ethics.
Yes.
The ethical thing to do. But then, by that time, it was 5 years that he had left the group of Corey. And he says, by that time...
It's okay.
It's okay, we should. So we started working on glycogen phosphorylase, that enzyme, he and me. And very, very rapidly, within a year and a half, we realized, we found out that the activation of the enzyme was totally different from what they thought it was. And we discovered that it was activated by a reaction called reversible phosphorylation. Enzymes are molecules that you can put a phosphate on them, they change conformation, remove the phosphate.
And then they would...
So they can, it's like a traffic light, you know, that can move to the green, to the red.
and then back.
Yeah. So we discovered reversible protein phosphorylation, for which we got the Nobel Prize.
Now, this is the point.
40 years later.
This is the point where I want to ask you, because yours is a life of collaboration. Some scientists work within their own mind only. You begin with your friend in Switzerland, a collaboration.
He worked on another project.
No, but still you have the tendency to collaborate.
Yeah.
I want to ask about the nature of scientific collaboration.
Well,
how does this work?
With Ed Krebs was a remarkable one.
Yes.
Many people, we worked together for 40 years,
yes.
You see. Many people say, was it complicated to...
Yes.
Absolutely not. We had some, you know, scientific disagreement. That doesn't make any difference. At first, he always laughed because at my English, because every morning at 10 o'clock in the morning, I said, allons prendre, let's go take a coffee, because in French you say, on prend un café. So he was always laughing at my English. What he doesn't realize is that within a year, my English didn't improve very much, but his deteriorated completely because he was using French terms.
He was a native English speaker, but you corrupted his English.
Yeah. At first, you know, for fun, he says, let's go take a coffee. Anyway, so we worked with Ed Krebs.
Again, this process, and I know it may be so symbiotic that it's even hard to separate, but somebody has an idea, he talks to the other one, you try it out, there's never a competition.
It was wonderful. You know, there's those, it was never worked for me.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yes.
It was really, really fun. The pleasure. When you work on something new, we had just discovered this reversible protein phosphorylation as a regulatory mechanism. It turned out to be a fundamental mode of regulation of cells. And this is why we got the Nobel Prize. When you work on a new project, you know, every week, you discover something new. You know? So it was an enormous amount of fun.
When you, and again, this is a generalization that may be uninteresting to you, but do you have a goal in mind? You have a problem that you want to address. Do you have a goal of what it can be, or do you just day by day discover new possibilities?
Let me tell you, for me,
yes,
the beauty of science is that you know where you start from, you never know where you will end up. You cannot buy a discovery in science. You cannot order at will, at any price. You work on a project and you don't know where you'll end up, and all of a sudden, people have often compared science to the discovery of America by Christopher Columbus.
He was going one place.
Yes. He said he wanted to discover a new way to go to the East Indies, but rather than going east, he went west.
Right.
Secondly, he never discovered the East Indies he was looking for, but he discovered a new continent that nobody knew existed. And then finally, like today, all the people in the administration of Queen Isabella were furious at her because she had spent far too much money on what they call a useless adventure.
Right. So in this day, with extraordinary achievements in research, principally in the West, although increasingly elsewhere, the dilemma is often before great nations like China. how do we develop this kind of research achievement? And I have heard it said that the problem is not thinking the way you just thought. The problem is wanting a solution over here and not letting this wandering happen.
You are right. The first time I went to China, I visited many biotech companies, and I was disappointed that mostly they tried to find projects from the, I don't know, Encyclopedia Chimica, Chinese encyclopedia. You know. I hate to say that, but I have a...
Well, they are seeking now the right solution, so it's good to hear.
Yeah. I have a Chinese, I had a very good Chinese postdoc, and I went every year to China with him.
Yes.
We went to different, Changchun, we went to the northern Manchuria, and the people, the heads of the department, were working on very, very pedestrian problems. Japan, much more advanced. But things are changing.
Yes.
Changing a lot.
They are more open to research without defined end.
Yeah, the difficulty is that they send their best student to Europe, Lindau.
Yes.
You know, how many Chinese, probably 100,000 Chinese a year would want to go to Lindau, and now it's selected by the academy. I don't know what system they have, and I don't know how many they send to Lindau, but the trouble is that when you have Chinese students who come, once they are in America, they don't want to go back.
They stay.
They want to stay.
Because it's the system that supports this open inquiry.
Exactly. So it's difficult for them to send their best students and not have them return to China, you know, to see the... But, you know, things are moving and things are changing.
You open an important subject for us, and that is the nature also of teaching, of your generation to the next, whatever the nationality. Teaching has been an important part of your satisfaction as well. Can you give some sense of what kind of interaction? I asked before about the collaboration of somebody on your same level, but what about the collaboration between an older scientist and young? What insights do you have into that?
For me, it's very easy because I think that collaboration is very important. You have to collaborate. You have to speak with students.
You call that a collaboration. When it's a student and a professor, is that a collaboration?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, you get a Nobel Prize, but you would not have gotten a Nobel Prize without the help of your students. You know, they play a very important role.
What is the role? Do you assign? It's a little bit like that PhD professor who gave you a problem. Is that how it begins?
Yeah, I like the students the postdocs, you know, to have their own idea, their own projects, start on their own, to select their own project if possible. When I have a postdoc coming, I'm thinking of two of my best postdocs. One is Phil Cohen from Dundee. He wanted to come to me, and I said, I can't take him because I'm packed with postdoc, and secondly, I don't have any money to
bring him
to give you a fellowship. And he wrote back, he said, I just got a fellowship. I don't know, welcome or whatever, fellowship to come and work with you. And so I said, okay, come. He's the best postdoc I have ever had. His student, Nick Tonks, exactly the same story. Dear Dr. Fischer, I would like to come to Seattle and work in your laboratory. I would like to work on the sodium-potassium ATPase, which I believe must be regulated by protein phosphorylation. He was right, by the way. I wrote to him, this is fine. I think it's a very good project, but don't come to me. I know beans about the sodium-potassium ATPase. Why didn't you work with Tigeti or other people? And he said, but I said, if you really want to come to Seattle, I have 3 problems for you. The most difficult is the isolation of a tyrosine phosphatase. So the field had just exploded. Nobody had gotten anywhere. And then the second problem was a hormonal problem with Ed Krebs, and I don't even remember what. He said, I want the tyrosine phosphatase. And so he came to me, and he solved the problem. He isolated the first tyrosine phosphatase.
Do you notice that they, in the telling, sound like the same personality you had as a young person? They are persistent. They know what they hope to do, and they insist in the face of discouragement to do it.
Yeah.
It was like you.
Yeah.
Really.
Anyway, Nick Tonks has also been superb. He's now a professor at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratories, and I'm on the phone.
Here's what I don't entirely understand. I can understand the coming together of a good student and a good professor in a collaboration around an issue. You have become almost famous for your love for Lindau as a gathering. But this is when you meet.
No doubt about that.
And we need to talk about that. But what I don't understand is what can happen in a week. I can understand what can happen with a professor and a student following a problem over a long time. But what can happen between distinguished laureates, because Lindau is about Nobel laureates into countering the young scientist? What can happen in a week? Why does this excite you as a circumstance?
Why what?
Why does this excite you as a possibility? What is a week? What can happen?
You know, I'm curious. That's it. I'm curious about things. I'm curious about science. I'm curious not only, all the things that science had given you over the centuries.
Yes.
But mostly what you don't know about science, all the big problems that have not yet been solved.
Okay.
This is what excites me the most, interests me the most. How did life appear on Earth? What kind of life you might have on other planets. How medicine will progress. What will happen in the near future. You can't. I remember a lady interviewing me. That was at the turn of the century in 2001.
The millennium, yes.
She was interviewing, she said, could I speak with you about medicine and the future of medicine? And I said, well, what do you have in mind? as future? She said, oh, I don't know, maybe 50 years, 100 years. I said, look, it's like if you asked a general of cavalry during the Civil War to plan for World War III. He would say, give me a cavalry of 10,000 and I can defend Washington.
Right.
I said, it's absolutely impossible to predict that. And
but the young that you meet at Lindau, for example, they are involved in the projects.
Lindau is a lot of fun because you interact with students.
Yes.
I never got a postdoc from Lindau, but I think many people, because I went there too late, when I didn't want postdocs anymore. But some people, take advantage of Lindau by speaking with students and then having them come and postdoc to you. In fact, when I went with my daughter, Elise, to Lindau, a couple of people offered her to take her as she didn't have a PhD degree at that time, but offered them to come, to join their group. So that's a nice thing.
So it's a kind of scouting opportunity?
For some.
But what do you think they ask of you, these young, dynamic, they've been selected for Lindau, they are already launched, they have impressed somebody with their abilities. What do they ask of a Nobel laureate? What do they want from you in such a situation?
Many people is on what basis, how did you get a Nobel Prize? The Chinese, when you go to China, the Chinese they say, I want to get a Nobel Prize, what should I do? Very often.
And you don't give them the right answer because there is no...
They are much more advanced.
Yes.
Students are usually, they're undergraduate, graduates, and postdocs in Lindau, which is a good thing.
Yes.
But I think mostly you see postdoctoral fellows over there. I think you admit up to people who are postdoc for 6 years. Peter would know.
Yes. So, do you meet, because you have gone to Lindau, what, 20 times, 15 times?
Sorry?
You have gone to Lindau many times.
Yes, I know, as much as I could.
As much as you could?
Yes. If I could, I would go to every Lindau meeting.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. We were received so graciously. We went to Lindau because we were invited there when we were in Stockholm for the Nobel Prize.
Ah.
Yes, Count Lennart and Sonia. Somebody said that Sonia Bernadotte wanted to speak with me
with you.
And with Bev. And we met Lennart and we met her. And she said, I would like to invite you to come this year or next year to Lindau. And I was ecstatic. And I'll tell you why.
Please.
One day, 10 years before, I take the plane from Boston to Europe, to Zurich.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, behind me, seated behind me, I hear a voice which is unmistakable. George Wald. I immediately recognized he was seated behind me. So I get up and said, George, what the hell are you doing? He said, what the hell are you doing? I said, well, I'm going to Europe. I'm going every year to Europe because I have very little family, but mostly friends, etc. And he said, oh, I'm going to a place called Lindau. And I said, tell me about that. I said, well, it's a place where Nobel laureates give talks to students. And I thought, that is fantastic. That Nobel laureates would spend a week speaking with students. Fantastic for students in a week having the possibility of listening to 20, 30 Nobel laureates speaking of things they like, things they are doing. That's absolutely marvelous. So when I got the Nobel Prize and Sonia said, we'd like to invite you to Lindau, you know.
A dream come true.
Yes, I immediately accepted. I said, sure, I'd be delighted to come. And I never regretted it.